In this video, we'll be looking at creating the different variables for our break-even analysis visualization tool. So variables in Power BI we refer to as parameters. So all the different variables like selling price, variable cost per unit, expected unit sold, and projected fixed costs, we're going to also set all these variables as parameters. So let's start. So how you set parameters in Power BI is you go to your modeling tab. So the first one we're going to create, the first parameter is our selling price per unit. We're going to leave that as a whole number. The minimum is the starting point of our slider, as we call it. So I would assume that you're not going to sell anything for less than $1 currency. So I'm going to leave that as a minimum selling price starting at 0. Moving on to maximum, I'm assuming for this example, the maximum price we'll sell any unit for is $50. You can use whatever value you want in your environment, but for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm using 50. I'm going to use that, I'm going to set it to 1 increments. So it goes from unit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 50. And the default I'm going to leave at 0. You can leave this option tick add slicer to this page. So once you've done that, you click on OK. And great, that's our first slicer that we've created. So just to make that a bit bigger. So now what you can see, what I mean by a slicer is that if you start dragging this, you can see the variables start changing. There, 9, 14, and so on and so forth. We'll get back, later on we'll get back to formatting these slices. So that's the first variable that we've created, or the first parameter. Now we're going to move on to the next parameter, which is the variable cost per unit. So we're going to do exactly the same example as the previous one. I'm also going to leave it as a whole number, minimum leave it as 0, starting at 0. The maximum, let's say the maximum variable cost for our units is 30. We're going to work on 1 increment, so 31, 32. 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 30. And we're going to start off at 0. And we're also going to add slicer to this page. Again, let's click OK. So as you can see here on the right hand side, we're starting to create all our parameters. So there's the first parameter that we've created, called the selling price per unit. Now we've created the second one, the variable cost per unit. So in Power BI, the fields here is where all your calculations are sitting and all your parameters. I'm just going to move this one up a bit. So again, if we move that, you can see it's starting to change. Okay, now the next parameter we're going to create is called, let's call this expected units sold. We leave that as a whole number, minimum 0, and let's say we anticipate 5,000 units. Let's do this perhaps in hundreds increments and default 0. There we go. See, it's moving there. And the final parameter we'll create is our projected fixed costs. Whole number again, minimum 0, maximum, let's say our maximum fixed cost would be 20,000. Increment, I'm going to put that in thousands, default 0. So again, when it comes to the parameters here, for the purpose of this exercise, you can just follow me along and use these parameters. But in your environment, you can set whatever these parameters are that your management or decision makers are looking at when they want to calculate the break-even units. All right, so now that we've created these parameters, let's do some formatting just to make it, just to clean it up a bit. So what we want to do is under visualization, we go to the format here. And then what we want to do we want to change this. Let's look. So you can either have it as a drop down. You can select the units that you want with a variable, or you can do it as a list. Or we can go between. So you can go from there to there, but that's not ideal. Or it's just a single value. So always try and leave it on single value. It just looks nicer. It's easier just to slide across the value that you want. All right. What I usually do is I go to General. Let's get that right there. See something here. All right. So what we want to do is we're going to flick through all the formatting. So this again is your choice. What you can do is you can select the slides header on and off. What you'll see here is it will show, and it will you can show it on and off. It's up to you. You can put the title on and off. So what I usually do is I actually prefer putting my headers this way, so price per unit. And what I do is I go back to the top. I'm going to turn off my. You can actually see the title's a lot bigger. It doesn't shrink as you increase or decrease your slice area. So that's one of the things that I usually do. Okay, the rest looks fine. All right, so I'm going to do the same with the variable. I'm going to put the slider header off, and I'm going to put my title on variable. I'm going to do the same here. Expected units sold. Lastly, projected fixed costs. Okay, also what I do is you can see the variable there is quite small, so you can also increase that. Text size, let's make that 15. 15. You need to click on the slicer first before you change it, yeah? So I'm changing this under numeric inputs. 15. Oh yeah, I just need to turn off the slicer header. Okay, great. It's looking a bit better. The next thing we can do is we can give it a bit of shadow. So what I do is I put shadow on just to make it stand out. Turn shadow on. Okay, so I just want to make the position this a bit smaller. You can just drag and drop whichever way you want to position it. Great. So at this stage, we've created 1, 2, 3, 4. We've created 4 parameters, variables that we're going to be using to visualize the outcome of the break-even units. The next thing, the final thing we want to do is we actually just want to make sure that all the formats are correct. So what we do is we just expand all this. And if you click on expected units sold, this one, you must make sure that the format is ready. It's correct. So in this instance, we wanted to show it as a whole number. So the data type is whole number, that's correct. We don't want it as a percentage. We can maybe put that as a dollar amount. Depends on what currency you're operating in. Change that to dollar. And just to give you a bit of, here's the coding for this parameter we've created. So we said generate a series starting with 0 up to 5,000. And then we've limited to 100. But what we need to do is we need to change this back to, just change it to dollars, see what happens. What you can do is you can check that your parameters have been set up correctly. If you go to this card here, there's under visualization, you go and you click on this one that says card, which brings up this table here. What you do is just drag your expected units sold, this measure here, just drag it in there. Selling price. Just check the first one. Just drag it in there. So you can see here, this 28 agrees to the selling price per unit. So if we change it, it changes to 22, 32, so on and so forth. We just check, testing that our parameters have been set up correctly. I'm going to do the same with the other ones. Look at our variable cost per unit. So you can either drag it here, or you can just drag it here. So let's drag it here. So 2, you can see the variable cost per unit agrees to that variable there. We change that to there. It's dynamic, it changes. So that's all we can see. I'm just going to delete these. I'm just going to rename this sheet, break even. Okay, so that concludes the first video of our break-even visualization tool.